Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630.
It is 8:37 here on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. And what is Washington talking about today, other than the Redskins? They're talking about this ongoing fiscal cliff negotiation.
That's right.
Between the House and the White House. And, Brian, the President Obama, let's bottom line it. President Obama wants to increase taxes and raise spending for more stimulus money.
And not only that, he wants the authority to raise the debt limit at his will.
All by himself, which is a violation of the Article 1 of the Constitution. Meanwhile, I thought this whole thing was about reducing the deficit. That was my understanding.
No.
And the Republicans put forth a proposal yesterday, $2.2 trillion in spending cuts. $2.2 trillion. That's a big number. And that was, of course, laughed out of the room by the White House. So, whenever I'm perplexed about where things should go when it comes to fiscal policy.
Yeah, I know who I turn to.
Larry Kudlow.
Absolutely.
Host of the Kudlow Report on CNBC, and, of course, the Larry Kudlow Show right here on WMAL Saturdays at 7 p.m. Mr. Kudlow, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. I don't know if I can live up to that. But I will say one thing regarding the Republican counteroffer. It's actually $1.4 trillion in spending cuts, and then it's $800 billion in new revenue.
Oh, thank you for correcting me. And most of those revenues are coming from limitations in the entitlement, Social Security, Medicare, right?
Most of the cuts, right? That's $600 billion in health care savings, $300 billion in other entitlements, $200 billion on the COLA for Social Security, and $300 billion on something called further discretionary savings, which is what's left of the sequester. So, what you have here, look, John Boehner, in my opinion, is being very valiant in seeking a deal. I mean, this really, once again, he's moving to more revenues and lower spending cuts, okay? He's moving in Obama's direction. And I don't know if he can get that through his own caucus, and I don't know how this is going to turn out. But he's moving in their direction. The real tragedy here is the outright rejection by the White House. And the principal part, if you read what the White House says, I think it was Pluff, who's the communications director, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, it's all about higher tax rates.
Right.
That's all it was. These guys are obsessed with raising the top tax rates. That's all they care about. They have no peace in there on spending cuts. In fact, they want to increase spending, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And in fact, even their so-called spending cuts aren't really spending cuts. So Boehner's given it his best college try, and he was rebuffed, and I don't think we're anywheres right now.
And Larry, let's be clear here. The reason that the White House is so fixated on raising the tax rates is because they know that will create a civil war within the Republican Party. They are trying to destroy the Republican Party by forcing this issue, right?
Well, that's an interesting point. I think I would probably guess that the first and foremost reason is to assuage their left-wing base. And that's what Obama ran on repeatedly, taxing the rich and so forth. In terms of destroying the Republican Party, they're not going to destroy the Republican Party. I mean, what could happen here? You've probably seen these articles. Republicans may just do nothing. I mean, they just may vote present on the Senate Democratic bill if it comes to the House and say, okay, fine, raise all the tax rates. Extend all the tax rates, the middle-class tax rates, and raise the top tax rate. They may vote present. They may not do anything on this. They're not going to give up the debt ceiling. That's for darn sure. So they may kind of walk away from this and give Obama what amounts to a rather hollow victory. And other than taxes, settle nothing. I mean, when you look at this document, there's 1.75 spending cuts for every revenue increase. That's the lowest ratio that Republicans have ever put up. And they originally wanted, I think Simpson-Bowles wanted, 3-1, and I think Republicans wanted 4-1, and many Republicans don't believe they'll ever get 4-1 because that's what happened years ago with Reagan in '82.
All right, do you think they'll ultimately get down to it? I mean, is this just, laying out your markers and grandstanding, and that ultimately we're going to get a deal at the very last moment, or are we headed over the cliff?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I'm not enthusiastic about answering that question right now because I think they're just really far apart. And
I mean, they're way apart.
They're way apart. And, there's a bunch of Democrats I don't know if Obama is part of this or not, but there's a bunch of Democrats that would let all the tax cuts expire and then come back in 2013 and try to write a bill that cuts the middle-class tax cuts. That is the cliff, and that'll do some damage to the economy. I would call that bluff. I think that's a bluff, okay, because I don't think the president wants to risk a recession or a 9 or 10% unemployment rate.
Here's the thing, Larry.
It would wreck his first term, his second term. It would wreck his second term. It would wreck his legacy. He would be Herbert Hoover Obama with 2 recessions. I don't think he wants that, so I'm willing to call his bluff. I agree with what Keith Hennessy wrote in the Journal yesterday. But I honestly don't know, because the way this thing is stacking up, I mean, look, here's one set of differences that are huge. The Obama proposals want to add stimulus spending. That's not the point. The point here was a $1.2 trillion sequester, remember? And the second point was the expiration of the Bush tax cuts.
Yes.
Where's that sequester spending? I mean, in effect, you've gone from $1.2 trillion, which was last year's decision, down to $1.4 trillion over 10 years. That's the new Republican position. They're giving up a lot on discretionary spending. This was all discretionary spending. So that number is $300 billion, defense and non-defense, right? That has shrunk. That has shrunk from 1.2 to 300 billion. That's a huge. I mean, we're not getting the spending cuts, which are the real problem, if you ask me.
It's just not serious.
But the deficit.
But the thing that troubles me, Larry, is I think you're right. There's some bluffing going on.
Right.
They're playing poker.
They are playing poker.
And this is serious stuff. We ought not be playing poker. We ought to be getting to the table and figuring it out, and not throwing down the gauntlet and trying to bluff one another.
Yeah, well, you got to get Mr. Obama and you got to get Mr. Boehner in the same room. That's the only way this thing's going to work. It's Reagan and Tip O'Neill, I guess.
Let's get him in this room.
Yeah.
We'll get him right here. We'll give him all 4 hours on the morning show.
And we'll let Larry stand between them and act as the arbiter, the mediator.
I mean, this thing, basically, bottom line, this is moving in the wrong direction.
Yep,
okay?
You're right.
Bottom line, wrong direction. And the second bottom line, the Republican counteroffer really goes toward Obama. I mean, it's interesting politically. The GOP is acknowledging that the president was reelected.
Yeah.
Okay, they're acknowledging that. But he's not acknowledging any give that the House is still in Republican hands.
We got to leave it right there,
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you so much, Larry. Good to have you.
Larry Kudlow, host of the Kudlow Report on CNBC and the Larry Kudlow Show right here on MAL on Saturdays.